Newsfirst, face to face with Jamal Ratnayaka.
Good evening and welcome to yet another episode of Face to Face, coming to you live and direct from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo. Today is the 11th of March and today my guest is a returning guest. He is no stranger to the show and also the talk of the town today because he was the sole representative at a meeting convened by President Ranil Wickremesinghe that was facilitated for opposition political parties to discuss and deliberate matters considering or concerning the IMF regulations and conditions. He is M.S. Sumanthiran, President's Council, Member of Parliament. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, Mr. Sumanthiran, and welcome back on the show.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Sumanthiran, first things first, I'm very certain that our viewers are very excited and intrigued to know about what transpired during the meeting with the President and the IMF delegation at the President's office earlier today. So let's get the ball rolling on tonight's show, speaking to us about what was discussed, what did you raise, what sort of concerns were brought forward and so on.
Well, first and foremost, this was not a meeting with the IMF delegation. This was a meeting with the President and government officials, Prime Minister and two Ministers of Finance as well.
Right.
As a preliminary discussion prior to the opposition meeting the IMF. That's what we were told.
Okay.
So the meeting commenced with the President asking the Secretary to the Treasury and the Governor of the Central Bank to broadly tell me the program where it is today, and then he asked for any concerns that I had.
Yes.
And I raised a few concerns, primarily that for us to discuss the IMF program, we must have proper information. The IMF has recommended various fiscal policies, tax measures, etc. We are not even sure that it is the IMF recommendation. The government seems to be putting everything on the IMF and saying, well, these are IMF prescribed,
yes, definitely.
And the IMF generally is quiet about that. Nevertheless, even if it is the IMF recommendation, there is no analytical data to back that recommendation that has been published.
Right.
We know that there are reports called technical assistance reports that the IMF gives the government when they make recommendations, and those are not published.
Right.
The IMF's policy is that they cannot publish it without consent from the government concerned.
I see.
So initially I raised that issue asking why we were kept in the dark. Our support is being sought to support the IMF program, but we are being kept in the dark with regard to any analysis that the IMF is supposed to have done prior to making concrete recommendations. And immediately the President said, no, we don't have any reason why that should be kept secret, and asked the Governor and the Secretary Treasury to immediately hand those reports to me. I asked for them to be published.
Right.
But they said, no, you have asked for it, so we'll give it to you. If anybody else, any other party leader in Parliament asks for it, we'll make it available to them as well. Then there were the concerns that I raised with regard to some of the timelines.
Right.
From what we know, the IMF had wanted certain measures completed by end of February 2024. And we counted about 44 of those. Only 13 of those have actually been completed.
I see.
We don't have information on 16 of those, so we don't know whether those have been done or not. But another 15 we know for sure have not been completed at all.
Right.
And there are some of those have been tagged as prior actions, meaning those must be given priority, and that has not been done.
Right.
For instance, publishing the financial statements of 52 SOEs, which is crucial.
Yes.
If the government is thinking of SOE reforms, and they need to reform the SOEs, even those have not been done. Crucial list of actions that the IMF prescribed as prior actions, 2 of those don't even find place in the government's action plan.
I see.
And then there are some other important ones like implementation of the Anti-Corruption Act, a particular plan. None of those have been done. So I raised those examples. Those were only examples.
Right.
And the answers that the 2 state ministers gave were that yes, they admitted that those have not been done, but that they have agreed with the IMF due to various constraints that those are going to be delayed.
Right.
Now, so that we have to check with the IMF whether in fact the IMF has
been
agreed to extend the deadlines for those.
Yes.
With regard to the taxation policy, I raised one example, and that is withholding tax. There are analyses done by agencies here that show that when the revenue collection was falling because of certain actions taken by Gotabaya Rajapaksa administration, if you wanted to reverse that, withholding tax rate should have been increased, and that would have netted in a substantial sum
amount, yes,
from actual income earners.
I see.
Direct taxes,
okay,
rather than increase the VAT percentage to 18%,
yes,
indirect, and that naturally falls on the as a burden on everyone, and the poor suffer the most.
Yes.
There was no proper answer to that as to why WHT rates were not increased, and when the VAT rate was increased, the government itself said the reason for that is that revenue collectors are not meeting their targets.
Right.
So if they are not meeting their targets, the poor need not pay for that.
Yes.
So I mean the meeting went on for about an hour, and we had intense discussion on some of these intricate matters also. But most of what I raised were only examples that showed us, as it is now, that the IMF program did not properly share the burden amongst the people.
I see.
That it was overly hard on the poor and the vulnerable, and therefore from the information that we have now, we cannot support this program.
Right.
Unless, of course, they show us analysis to the contrary.
Yes.
And now that the government has agreed to give us that, I said we will study it and then meet with the IMF.
So you have first-hand experience today. You met with the president and key stakeholders who are negotiating with the IMF, Mr. Sumanthiran. Do you, in your honest opinion, believe that there is a concerted effort by the political establishment as well as officials to follow this IMF program to completion and also to ensure that Sri Lanka's economy goes on to a better track?
Well, I don't know whether they have very clear long-term goals in mind. They seem to be looking at short-term reliefs, and this being election year somehow create the impression that everything is now rosy and things have gotten better. whether the IMF has actually prescribed some of these measures, we are not sure.
Right.
And even when they have actually prescribed those measures, whether those are the best
Measures to
take in a distributive sense,
Yes.
We have very serious concerns. Because there are vested interests.
Yes.
Now, the imposition or connecting the excise duty to certain factors has been put off for beyond June 2024. Now, why that is the case, we don't know. But what we do know is that the excise duties impact on certain persons, certain agencies, companies, and those vested interests have immense leverage when it comes to compelling governments to behave in certain ways.
Certainly.
So that is one. The other is tax exemptions that have been given under the BOI and Strategic Projects Act and all of that. Nothing has been published as to the taxes that have been lost as a result of these exemptions.
Right. So you brought up a very important topic there, Mr. Sumanthiran, because earlier today I saw a news where the Indian Revenue Department is focusing on collecting around 160 billion rupees that have been evaded in taxes. Was there any mention or was there a discussion that came up regarding bolstering the method of tax collection, of revenue collection through the government?
Yeah, that was touched upon. In the last parliament, I was the chair of the Public Finance Committee.
Yes.
And from that experience also, I was able to participate in this discussion to show that there is reluctance on the part of the tax collectors to change system of collection, etc. The Ramesh was introduced, but there was a lot of resistance to that. And so on, which was acknowledged by the officials that it is difficult to change these systems to more efficient systems and so on. Now, all that is granted, but while we are in an economic crisis and struggling to recover from it, we have to take bold steps and implement those. We cannot put the blame on trade unions or tax collectors, unions, vested interests, etc., and hope that we can come out of the crisis.
Yes.
So that is where transparency is of utmost importance.
Certainly.
And without these analytical data, transparency was severely lacking. Now that the government has given an undertaking that at least those reports will be made available, we may be able to have a greater look in to this matter, and then tell the public our own judgment with regard to this program.
Right. So, like you mentioned earlier, this year is an election year, be it the presidential election or even a general election. So, we have seen historically when an election is approaching, governments have resorted to executing populist decisions. They give relief to the people. They reduce austerity measures. But we are in a state where we cannot afford to follow populist decisions anymore. But do you believe in order to secure power once more, there might be a deviation from these IMF recommendations and the processes that are set in place to implement such populist decisions?
I don't know whether they will have to deviate.
Yes.
The IMF also may be acting politically. We don't know. Because some of the actions where a lot of information is hidden,
withheld,
suggests that it's lip service to certain principles, but that something that we can't see in action.
Right.
But yes, populist policies are the norm when elections are around the corner. That's a tried and tested method. So we are going to see a lot of that happening, which might irreversibly damage the economy once more.
Right.
So that is why the opposition has to be eternally vigilant and raising the alarm when such measures are resorted to.
So, speaking of the role of the opposition, you were the only opposition representative who made it to the meeting today. We saw the leader of the opposition, Sajith Premadasa, saying that he will not attend, and leader of the NPP, Anukumara Dissanayake, even the ITAC members of your political party did not attend either. So, do you believe the outcome of this meeting would have been more constructive had those representatives also attended today's meeting?
No, one correction, there was no decision to boycott the meeting from the ITAC.
ITAC, right.
I am the representative of the Tamil National Alliance, including the ITAC, at the party leaders meeting, and so in that capacity I was invited,
right.
and I attended. The other two parties, the JVP and the SJB, had said that they will not attend.
Right.
I'm not very sure as to the reasons why they took that decision.
Yes.
As far as we were concerned, we didn't have any reason to boycott this meeting.
Right.
In point of fact, I myself, in my capacity as previous chair of the Public Finance Committee, had convened 3 or 4 meetings of party leaders over the last 2 years. Even before we declared bankruptcy, we had 2 meetings, and then just prior to the debt restructuring, domestic debt restructuring proposals came to light, or just after it was presented to the cabinet, I convened a meeting with the president, also attended. So we've taken an active part in figuring this out, in taking positions, because this impacts every single person living in the country. So I think whether you are in the opposition or in government, in a crisis situation like this, which affects every citizen of the country, one has to act responsibly and engage in the process. Of course, there may come a time when if you totally disagree with some measures, you boycott or you stay away and all of that. But personally, I don't think, with regard to the IMF program, we have reached that stage as yet.
Right. So moving away from economic concerns towards a more political stance, regardless of what election will be held later this year, let's focus on the presidential election. If it is held and it's announced, what sort of decision, what sort of support, and who will you support in the upcoming presidential election as a party, and who do you believe would be the best candidate for your support?
Well, it's far too early to say anything on that. We know that presidential election is due, and it must be held between the 19th of September and 19th of October.
Yes.
Apart from that, we don't know who the candidates will be.
But we already have 1 or 2 front runners who have expressed their willingness for candidacy.
We are discussing with all of them. We've started those discussions, and we will take a decision, as we approach the election. We have been cheated many a time.
Right.
So there is a sense amongst our people that there is no point in supporting anyone. That is not a good feeling, because you need to participate in some way, and have your impact on the outcome of these elections. So we Yeah, in contemplation as much as in discussion with all the possible candidates. And when the time comes, we will make a decision with regard to that.
Right. So when the time does come and you support a certain candidate, hypothetically, what sort of measures will you request that candidate to take in order to resolve the national issue, ethnic harmony, racial harmony, and so on, especially concerning citizens in the north and east? What sort of decisions would you take in order to ensure that a particular candidate you support does in fact promote such ideologies and so on?
You see, with regard to the Tamil national question, all of the parties have promised a lot in the past. So there is not much more that we can ask them to pledge than what they have already done. The question is in the delivery. They do promise, but they don't deliver.
They don't execute, yes.
So that's where the problem is. Of course, we would like a power sharing arrangement that is meaningful and durable, and that will meet with just aspirations of our people, and that will be a final long-lasting solution to this question. Whoever has the political courage to say it and deliver, we will back. But I'm not sure that we have anyone in the horizon with that kind of resolve yet.
Right. So where does M.S. Sumanthiran stand when it comes to the Indo-Sri Lanka fishermen's crisis, the fishermen in India encroaching on Sri Lanka's territorial waters and ridding Sri Lankan fishermen of their harvest, a valuable resource?
My position has been quite clear. I mean, I have been the only MP who presented 2 bills to ban bottom trawling, twice as private members' bill.
Right.
And in the last government, when there were discussions at the highest level, I was part of the delegation, the ministerial delegation with Mangala Samaravira and Mahinda Amaravira, that went to Delhi and spoke to Sushma Swaraj, their Minister for Fisheries and Agriculture. And a joint statement was issued that the bottom trawling practices must come to an end.
Yes.
And after that, my private member's bill was passed in Parliament, banning bottom trawling. The problem is in the implementation. Although that is part of the law, the government is hesitant to implement that in full.
Why do you think that is?
I don't really know. In the meantime, there are local trawlers also that have started, and apparently there are various authorities that are making money on allowing these local trawlers also to function.
Right.
So it's got a little more complicated now. I even led a seaward protest, the first of its kind or the only one of its kind, from Mullaitivu to Point Pidru.
I think Parliamentarian Mr. Sirasa also joined you in that.
And against this. So our position is quite clear that the practice of bottom trawling, by whoever it is done,
regardless,
is damaging the ecological resources. The seabed is totally stripped of everything, and that must be brought to an end.
Right.
If we, even on environmental concerns, if we stop the bottom trawling practices, then the invasion of Indian fishermen into our territorial waters will be minimal. You don't draw a line in the water. It's very difficult in a narrow strip of a bay to mark out boundaries. Straying from this side to that and that side to this has happened from time immemorial.
True.
But if it is done by artisan, small boat people, then the impact is little. But what happens now is that hundreds, if not 1,000, large trawlers come and they scrape the bottom of the seabed.
Yes.
That is what that needs to be stopped.
Right. So I was in conversation with Member of Parliament M.A. Sumanthiran, President's Council, who represents the TNA and also the ITAK. Thank you very much, Mr. Sumanthiran, for joining me this evening and sharing your valuable insights from the meeting with the President and the officials who are handling Sri Lanka's crucial matters with the IMF, and also giving me your honest opinion regarding the political scenario in Sri Lanka as well. Thank you very much once again for joining me this evening.
Thank you. Good night.
And that's the way it was on Face to Face this evening. Thank you very much for stopping by. Take care and good night.